So what is going on, Dammers? My name is Mehul and welcome to your 5th Angular 6 tutorial. And in this tutorial we're going to take a look at how to actually work with lifecycle hooks, and not really work with, but just a brief overview. This would be a quick 2-second video tutorial on lifecycle hooks in Angular. And we just need to know this because we will be making use of lifecycle hooks a lot later in our applications which we'll be creating. But on its own, there's really no use of lifecycle hooks just knowing what they are, because you can't create an Angular application which just contains an ng on init function, right? It doesn't make sense. So this is just a step for a bigger staircase. I don't even know what that means, but anyways, so let's get started. Okay, so what we have in here is some lifecycle hooks listed for Angular. So these are all the lifecycle hooks which you might use sometimes in your code. Now, you might use them and you might use them sometimes, right? Not every time. So starting from the top, what we have is on changes. Now this on changes is invoked every time there's a change. Let's just say you have some kind of input property in your component. So if you change that, this on changes will be fired. So you can handle those kind of changes there. On init would be fired whenever your component is initialized, right? And the thing with on init is that it would be called only once per component. So you can be sure that the code you write in on init would be fired once. So this is an ideal place for, let's say, if you're retrieving some data with some REST API for a given component, then on init is the place where you would want to perform an HTTP request. Okay, so the next lifecycle hook we have is the do check one, and the do check one is actually fired by Angular when actually Angular thinks that there is a change, right? So what we have with Angular is that Angular itself has some sort of detector which actually detects the changes behind the scenes, right? Because that's how the things work. So do check would be fired by Angular if Angular suspects something has changed. So you can add your own custom implementations in this do check. Then what we have is the after content init, after content checked, after view init, and after view checked. Now these four would make a lot more sense to you if you know something about the content projection, but I believe I have not covered it yet. But what content projection, I can give you an overview of what that is okay, let's just take it that way. For example, let's just get rid of this. This is a quick intro to content projection. Let's just say you create a select tag, right? So you have a bunch of option tags here, like option 1, and then option 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth, right? So what Angular does is, let's just say if you're creating your own custom component, what you can do is let's just say this is your own custom component. Let's just say this is my own component, right? So Angular allows you to add these children inside your own component instead of directives. So let's just say you want every option to be red colored. So what you can do is just add a class of red to every option in here, right? For example, let's just say you want this option to be red as well. I'll come to that in a second, what I wanted to say earlier. So okay, all right, so we have all of these options as red. Now you could have implemented this thing in a single component file as well. So I could say my own component, all option colors and red, and inside the definition of this file, when I render all those options, I would just add loop over every option and add this class as red. Now the problem arises when I want this second option to be blue, right? So in that case, I cannot do something like all options and then red. In that case, I would have to do like option 2 is blue and then render it as blue. You get the idea. I have to write a lot of code to make it specific to a particular option, and it is kind of pain in the butt to organize all that code. So what actually, coming to the point, what content projection pretty much is in one line, is that you can write my own component and then your child components here, and you can pretty much work with all of your child components just right here. And in this definition, of this own component, you would write ng content, and what this would do is that it would reflect whatever child components you are passing in this my own component. So in a nutshell, what we were talking about was right, so we have after content init, after content checked, after view init, after view checked. So these 4 events are associated with this content property. So in a nutshell, what we have is that for content projection, what we have are these 4 lifecycle hooks, and after content init would fire if there's a change. Okay, so what we have in here is that I have created this simple program which pretty much just adds a component and removes it. So if I add the test component, you can see that we get ng on init called first of all, then ng do check is called, then after content init is called, you can see that on init gets called, do check is called, after content init is called, content checked is called, view init is called, view checked is called, ng destroy is not called because it is not destroyed yet. But if I remove this component, you can see that ng destroy is called. Now if I add it again, add it one more time, you can see all these methods getting called again and again. And if I remove this component, you can see that ng destroy was called, then ng do check was again called because it seemed to Angular like something has changed, and then ng after content checked is called, and after view checked is also called because views are changed. So Angular's after content checked and after view checked are called after ng do checked. So this was basically the flow of how Angular is taking care of lifecycle hook events. And the takeaway from this is pretty much that ng on init is the place to call some methods you want to, because this is the point which would be called once in your code, and it would be by the time this method is called, your component would be ready to be rendered, right? So yeah, that was all for this one, and I'll see you then in the next video.
And one more thing, if you like this video, then don't forget to subscribe and press the bell icon to receive instant notifications.